Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, you know, I don't think I've ever seen the garden looking so lush and the colours so intense right at the end of August. Normally by this time of year, everything's starting to fade a little. But I suppose that's because we've had such a wet summer on this side of the country. It's one of the few benefits of too much rain. However, you can't stop the roll and turn of the seasons. And plants are beginning to set seed. And I'll be collecting seed, particularly of perennials, both to sow now and to store to make new plants for next year. Carol will be looking at umbellifers, plants like cow parsley with lovely open tops.
This is such a wondrous and multifarious family. You'll find that once you bring one umbel into the garden, you'll be greedy for more. You'll want to fill the whole place up with them.
And we'll be visiting a garden in Cheshire where a man's passion for one plant has filled his garden with late summer colour.
Dahlias give me more colour and more interest than any other plant, and so I've thrown out all the shrubs and everything else. Really, it's taken over my life, I suppose.
Good boy. Now, last time I was in here, I was showing you how the tomatoes were doing fine. The leaves were curling a bit, but that wasn't a problem. Everything was hunky-dory. Well, I shouldn't have spoken so soon. I think I remember saying that the risk of blight was very minor in a greenhouse. 2 days later, blight swept through this greenhouse. This, of course, is potato blight, the fungus which can turn potatoes to mush and completely defoliate them. And it affects tomatoes because tomatoes are cousins of potatoes. So, having seen the damage, I then stripped all the foliage off the plants, thinking it would stop the spread and that the existing fruit would ripen. Well, you can see the blight has spread to the stems, really clear here, and even worse than that, has spread to the fruit. So these are blighted fruit. If I leave these, they won't ripen, the blight will get to them first. So I think the only recourse is to harvest the green ones and make green tomato chutney, harvest any ripe ones that seem to be unaffected by blight and eat them, and then the plants and any blighted tomatoes I will burn. And if you can't burn them, you could bury them but at least about 1 metre deep, and that will rot down, or just bag them up and take them to your green waste disposal unit. But I'm afraid that's it. That's my tomato crop, a Ghana. Sooner or later, most gardeners get round to growing annuals from seed. But it seems to be another leap to grow perennials from seed, plants that will mature like this monarda and come back year after year. Plants which typically you go and buy at anything between about £5 and £15 each. But they will grow from seed, and often very easily indeed. What you need is a pair of secateurs. You need some brown paper bags or envelopes. I've got both here. Paper, because that way it can breathe a bit. If you put it into polythene, you get evaporation and moisture will not enable the seeds to keep. This is monarda raspberry wine. That's the seed head. Just take it off like that and push it, seed head, down in there. Now that's ready for sowing now if I want to, but it will keep in a cool, dark place for weeks and sometimes even months. You can see this, by the way, is just one plant. So if I have 20 seeds in there, think of the display that you can get. I'm having to creep through here because I don't want to crush my favourite plants. These are meconopsis sheldonii, and you can see they've set seed, these beautiful seed heads. And although they don't necessarily come true from seed, these are wonderful, rich blue. I'm going to try and grow them. If you want them to be exactly like the parent, better to propagate them vegetatively. But if I collect these seed heads and raise the seed, there is a chance that I could get dozens of fabulous meconopsis. And they really are royalty amongst plants. Rachel and I planted these primulas. This is Primula florindi, the Himalayan cowslip. Really, really successful. And you can't have too many of these. So let's cut that. Oop, that's caught in, so we'll do that at the same time. And that. Now, once you've collected your seed, you can either sow them straight away or store them. On the whole, it's easier to store the seeds until spring, sow them then as the seedlings grow, they can be moved on and planted out. And if you're storing your seeds, the basic conditions is a cool, dry place. Now, we actually store our seeds in here. Just keep them in the bag exactly as collected, and we just line up the bags. And this shed is perfect. It does get cold in winter, but the seeds don't suffer, and they come through perfectly well. If you don't have a cool, dry shed, resist the temptation to put them in an airing cupboard. They don't want to be warm. In fact, the best thing to do is air dry them for a few days, then put them in a sealed container in the fridge. And in a fridge like that, they will keep for months and have the byproduct of vernalizing them too, which means give them a winter period of cold, which is the trigger they need to germinate next spring. For the majority of perennials, saving and storing seed for a spring sowing is fine. But some seed likes to be sown fresh, as ripe or green seeds. Now, I'm going to store the monarda, but I'm going to sow the meconopsis and the primula. Meconopsis is not that difficult to grow from seed as long as it has moist, loose compost. Now, we've got our seed pods there, and I've made up a compost with really lots of grit in it. Ideally, this would be an ericaceous compost. Now, I don't use peat, but there are alternatives. If you haven't got an ericaceous compost, it doesn't matter terribly, but you will have to move them on into ericaceous conditions. So, as with all seeds, don't be tempted to sow too thickly. You're better off with a few healthy plants than a mass all cheek by jowl in there. And now I'm going to cover it with a layer of grit, which will protect it and keep the moisture in, but won't block the light. And of course, label it. I tried sowing Primula bulliana last year in the green, i.e. when they were completely fresh, and I had no luck whatsoever. And these are green seeds I've got here. I think the mistake I made was I kept it too wet. And also, and I'm sure of this, I kept it too warm. I put it onto a heated bench. Now, this is a species plant, and therefore will come true. Remember that seeds from a species, that's a plant that is not crossed with any other, will nearly always come true to the parent. But seeds from a cultivar or a hybrid, that's a plant that's the result of a cross between two others, will carry the characteristics of both parents. So therefore will be variable, and sometimes very variable. Now, my cold frames at the moment are having a revamp, but this just amounts to a sheltered corner. And it's a perfect place to put meconopsis and primula. Now, I'm going to have to keep those watered, but I'm going to cover one of the primula pots with cling film. A, that will mean I won't have to keep watering it so much. And B, it means it really will not dry out. I won't cover the other, and it's a little experiment just to see if it makes a difference. And I was reading about this tip over breakfast this morning. So I thought that's timely. We'll give it a go. And rather like hose pipes, I'm one of these people who can take a sheet of cling film and reduce it to a crumpled rag in the space of a millisecond. There we are. And I'll do all the rest of those seeds in due course. I'm often asked what my favourite plant is, and there's no real answer to that. But you can't beat the massed white foam of cow parsley running along a hedgerow or by the side of the road. And I do love all umbellifers, in whatever form they may take. And of course, an umbellifer is a plant that has these umbels of flower and then flat top, and they're perfect for insects, perfect for a garden. And Carol has been to see glorious umbellifers, both in the wild and in the garden.
People cherish the sight of Daucus carota, the wild carrot, up and down the country in late summer. This is a time when it makes these wonderful platforms of flower, mixing itself with grasses and other wild flowers. When you get down here and examine it, this flat platform is actually composed of hundreds of little flowers. And as those petals begin to fall, the whole umbel folds in on itself like a shell closing. While these seeds really set and ripen, it makes this almost wire-like structure around the edge, which gives it one of its other common names, bird's nest. But who wants to invite a carrot into the garden proper? Surely they belong in the veg plot. But this is such a wondrous and multifarious family. You'll find that once you bring one umbel into the garden, you'll be greedy for more. You'll want to fill the whole place up with them. Here at Berry Court, with the backdrop of this classic oast house, plantsman John Cook has created an exquisite garden that pays homage to the spirit of the wild. And some of the most significant players on the stage are the umbels. So many umbels, John. I mean, they play a pretty important role here, don't they?
They are. Partly because they give a very strong connection with the wild. We see, don't we, in any hedgerow or a meadow, cow parsley kind of plants.
Umbels all over the show.
Yes. It's like almost trying to get a sort of dreamlike evocation of the natural world.
Exactly. I suppose all the great plant explorers were intent on collecting shrubs and trees and climbers. They wouldn't have given umbels a second look, would they?
Not in the slightest, no. Gardeners would have seen something like that as a weed to be yanked out and tossed onto the compost heap, definitely. But now I think they are virtually my most valued garden plant.
It's got the structure of a tree, or hasn't it? Some great woody plant. What is it, John?
This is Pucedanum verticillari. Verticillari, obviously, because it's so sort of stiffly upright.
Yes, yeah.
Talk about a plant erupting out of the ground, but that does in spring, and it's got a fantastically long season, this plant, because right from that moment when it does erupt, up till deepest winter, when all you see, in fact, is the skeleton which is left. But it's a very sculptural shape, you know, right into the winter.
And it just says very proudly, you know, look at me, aren't I wonderful?
Yes, exactly.
In this part of the border, Angelica gigas, these plants are used to great effect. They kind of punch their way right the way through all these great mounds of different perennials. They're real punctuation marks, and further down the border he's used it with another umbel to achieve a completely different sort of feeling. If you wanted to introduce a ferny, frothy mass of a plant in your garden, then you couldn't possibly do better than Solenum wallicianum. One of the virtues of umbels is that they seed freely all over the show, but occasionally you want to decide just where you want to plant, and then it's worth buying an established plant in a pot, digging a hole and putting it in. No point trying to divide them though, because basically under the ground. They're all carrots, all have a big tap root and they're impossible to divide. If Angelica gigas and Selenum wallicianum are at the dramatic end of the umbel scale, and surely this plant, Amimajus, is at the opposite end. It's light, airy, almost frivolous. It gives this sort of ethereal effect, especially when it's used en masse. If you wanted to introduce this light touch, perhaps to a bed where you've got lovely dark plants like this beautiful echinacea, you can sow the seeds of Ami in the spring or even in the autumn previously. Prick them out into modules or individual small pots and then dot them right through the planting. Berry Court showcases umbels in all their glorious magnificence, from the daintiest of annuals to great statuesque giants, all of them abuzz with pollinating insects. Umbels bring something special to every bed and border. They bring structure and shape, and no garden can possibly afford to be without them.
Now, from time to time, I do ask you to contact me if you've got any gardening queries or if you've got a similar experience to my own. And I've had lots of letters regarding box blight. From the northeast of Scotland, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, right across the country. It does seem that box blight is endemic, and I'm afraid this tale of woe is depressingly familiar. But as far as box blight goes, there really is not a lot of choice in what you can do, because what it does is completely rips away through box plants. And you can see down in here that there you get this dieback, this chocolatey brown, sometimes a bit mouldy dieback, and it can kill the plant. And you have to remove all traces of it. However, there are box varieties that seem to be more resistant to blight than others, and one of them is Hansworthiensis. Now, this is one of the biggest growing boxes, and you can see that, right next to where there is blight, we've got plants growing here that seem to be untouched, and that's because they have an extra thick leaf. They're really much more robust. So I'm going to take cuttings from Hansworthiensis, and any thick leaf box will do. Grow them on, so at least I've got new stock that will be more resistant coming on, because if this weather continues, box blight is going to continue to be a problem. It's not going to go away. Now, when you're choosing material to take cuttings from, you want to look for nice, strong new growth that is upright, healthy, and vigorous. And you need a top, you need some leaves, and you need a stem. Down the bottom. Also, always with all cuttings, have a polythene bag. That will stop the transpiration of moisture and make it more likely to strike. When you're making cuttings of anything, you want really good drainage. So as well as a normal potting compost, add something to improve the drainage. Grit is fine, or I've got perlite here, which you can get from any garden centre. It could be up to as much as 50-50 of perlite and potting compost. Mix it in well. So lightly fill the pot like that. And that's ready. Now, you take a cut material, let's take any one out. There we have the cutting. There are far too many leaves on that because that will lose moisture before it develops roots. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off the lower leaves, simply like going like that. You leave too many, it'll dry out, too few, and there'll be nothing to feed the roots. Now that's a little long, so I'm going to cut that down. And ideally, cut below a leaf node. A leaf node is just the two sides where the leaves come out. Clean cut across and put it in the pot. It's best to put it against the edge of the pot. So I'm going to put one in each corner down the edge like that. Now, if you don't take your own cuttings, and if you've got some box, I really do urge you to try. It's incredibly satisfying. But someone gives you a box or you buy it, it's not a bad idea to put it into quarantine for about a month. Keep it in its pot, set it to one side, because it just might be introducing blight into your garden. And of course, you may not grow any box at all. You may not be taking cuttings, but here are some other jobs you can get on with this weekend. The strawberry runners that I potted up a few weeks ago are now ready to be separated from the parent plant and replanted. Choose a site that hasn't grown strawberries for at least 3 years and has been well manured over the last year. Space the young plants in rows or grids at least 2 feet apart. This will look rather wide spacing, but it gives each individual plant the opportunity to grow as big as possible and bear as much fruit as possible. We're all hoping for an Indian summer and our flowers to look as good as possible for as long as possible, and this includes containers. And the best way to do this is to give them a feed now. It wants to be high in potassium to maximize flowers, and this will come from homemade comfrey, liquid seaweed, or a general purpose tomato feed. Dilute it according to instructions and give them a feed now and again in 2 weeks' time. Just because we're coming to the end of summer, it doesn't mean to say that the weeds won't go on growing. And it's important to keep on top of them right through into autumn. And in a heavily planted border, the only solution is to get in there and hand weed. There are probably more flowers in the garden at this time of year than any other season. And one of the things I love doing is going out and just cutting a small bouquet to bring indoors into the house. These, for example, are seed dahlias, which I grew last year, kept the tubers, the colour, it was a mixed batch of seed, and I kept the colours I liked, and then lined them out. And the beautiful thing about dahlias is, the more you cut, the more flowers are produced right up till the first frost. And I love dahlias, but I probably don't love them with the same passion and intensity as Jeff Hoyle in Cheshire.
Whatever position you want to put it, there is a dahlia that will fit. I love the different sizes and shapes and colours. I mean, for starters, you've got every colour but blue. Then you've got big ones and you've got the miniature pompon dahlias, so you've got a wide variety of sizes. And you've got different shapes as well. And also even heights. You've got some that will grow to 8 foot high and others that only grow to 2 foot. Well, I was brought up to be a gardener, and my dad was a king dahlia grower, and when I was a lad, he used to have me crawling around under his dahlias. Well, when we first came here, it was just one long piece of grass. So I got into flowers, and as time's gone by, I realised that dahlias give me more colour and more interest than any other plant, and so I've thrown out all the shrubs and everything else. The lawns have got smaller. Really, it's taken over my life, I suppose. Well, I plan everything by height. I go around each autumn, measure how high each dahlia has grown and keep records. And then when I put my stakes in the following spring, I try to allocate a tall dahlia to a tall stake and a short dahlia to a short stake so that it gets a tiered effect. There's a dahlia there called Rycroft Delight, which always grows to about 8 or 9 feet. And so I know I can rely on that dahlia to grow that high the following year. I tried doing a colour scheme one year where I had a red bed, an orange bed, a yellow bed, and it didn't look right at all. So now I just go on height. The colours look after themselves. I tend to go for brighter colours and just have the odd white or a cream one here as a contrast. I love this dahlia. It's a miniature decorative called Blight and Lady in Red. I like it because of the strong colour, the fact that it's got very strong stems that makes sure it stands above the foliage, and I also like the lovely form of it. This one is a dark leaf variety called Happy Wink. It only grows about 2 foot tall, has loads of flowers, beautiful colour. The bees love it. If you want really strong flowers, the best thing to do to produce a strong growth and a bigger flower is to take out the two side shoots. So you just get them between your fingers and chop them off like that. For the novice, it might be better to try a miniature variety because they tend to have smaller flowers, stronger stems, and you'll see, for example, with Western Spanish Dancer here, I'm going to let 3 flowers grow on the one stem and it will be strong enough to support it. So I'll leave it to its own devices. The main thing that I do is keep on top of the deadheading, at least twice a week, but I do it more often than that, I would say. So you go around and chop off anything that looks as though it's about to die or has died, and discard them onto the compost heap. And you'll find that by the following day, there's plenty more flowers anyway. I'm quite ruthless. People say, I'll take that home and put it in a vase, but it's on my compost heap. It does take a lot of my time. Is it worth it? Absolutely worth it. I mean, when you get to times like this and you look around and you think, I've done that, yeah, it's worth it.
Now, I'm making a new garden here. This is a writing garden which I had tried to develop with the long grass and growing umbellifers, bulbs, even perennials through it. But in this wet weather, and with our heavy soil, the grass has dominated. And it's really difficult to lose that rather lank, over-lush feeling. Mind you, there is a moment in May which lasts anything from 10 days to 3 weeks, if you're lucky, when the cow parsley dominates and it's a lovely, light, airy white froth. And that's the spirit that I want to capture. The very, very best of May. If we can get that from April through to October, then I'll be delighted. And that's how I'm going to plant it. So it's going to be a white garden, very light, very airy, ramblers climbing up the apple trees, lots of scent, very full and easy, nothing formal about it at all. So, we've lifted the turf. Now, I'd like to pretend that I've used my grandfather's old turfing tool, which I have used a lot in the past, but it's horribly hard work. In fact, we hired a turf cutter. So if you want to lift more than just a little bit of turf, I can recommend it. And if you're taking up any amount of turf, don't throw it away. It's not rubbish. If you stack it grass face to grass face and build it up as a block, that forms the best potting compost or topsoil if you need it. So value every little bit of it. And I've got myself a project. I'll be working on this right through autumn and probably well into next year as well. Now, that's it for this week. Bye-bye.